start the show.
Hi, Joanna.
Hi.
Welcome to Yarn on the House.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today. Why don't you tell the followers what you do and what you're all about?
Sure. Well, I write children's stories, and I happen to be married to a very talented artist, so my husband illustrates the stories, and we have 3 kids who give us a lot of ideas about things to write about, things that were hard for them, things that were fun for them. And so I write stories and design patterns to go with the story, and Eric illustrates the stories, and then we publish them ourselves under the name Slate Falls Press. So we kind of wear a lot of hats, but we really like it a lot. So
yeah, definitely. So your latest book right here, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. This is actually a little different than our first 2 books. Because our first book was very specifically about our daughter and when she became a big sister. And our second book was very specifically about our second child, our son, who had a really hard time transitioning into his own bed when it was time for him to sleep in his own bed. He had a really hard time with that. So this book's a little different because Eric and I were able to combine a lot of our childhood memories together into this story. So it's another book about Phoebe, and in this book she overcomes her fear of learning to swim.
Yeah. That's a common fear amongst kids.
It is. And my husband and I both had a hard time. Well, I hated going under the water. You know, it was always, come on, just go under, you know, and I just, that fear of something terrible is going to happen. I'm just going to disappear, you know. But my husband and I grew up in New Jersey, and my family always went up to the mountains in New York State to a lake. And Eric's family always went to the Jersey Shore, a really nice Jersey Shore, not maybe what you'd think, but had a bungalow, and they would just all this time on the beach and digging in the sand and, you know, crabbing and having just such a great time. So we sort of compiled memories that we each had into one story, and so it was really fun to revisit those memories, and especially the times with our grandparents. All of our grandparents loved the water and loved to swim, and so it was kind of a tribute to them and our memories of spending time with them as a kid. So
yeah, that's really cool. Your books are interesting because they're not just children's books. They also include the knitting part. And this time you've actually started including sewing into the books too, which is really, really cool. So just kind of talk a little bit about the patterns and how you come up with them. Like, do you start thinking of a story first in the knitting? Like what kind of patterns you can incorporate in the story?
It's kind of funny because, well, for one thing, it's really unusual for a children's book author and illustrator to work so closely together like we do. So typically if you pick up a children's book at Barnes & Noble, you've got an author, you've got an illustrator, and they've been paired by an art director or an editor, and they don't communicate generally with one another. And I understand, I guess, why that is typically done. Where Eric and I, it's the opposite. We help each other all of the time. Whenever either one of us gets stuck creatively, you know, we can go to each other and say, I'm really having a problem with this, or what do you think about that? So at this point, all of our books have sort of come together like, I say it's like a memory. It's like it comes to us almost like a complete memory. It's just like a memory of something in the future. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I kind of have in mind like a color palette and textures and a season and a theme, and that ties into the story and to the patterns and to the setting and the characters. And so it's sort of like we just start talking, and I always try to have a notebook with me because we want to capture thoughts, because sometimes later you forget, well, what was I thinking there? And so I usually when we have a storyline, we have characters, we have a setting, we have patterns in mind. It's kind of like a whole collection that just comes to us as a fresh idea, and then we just go down on hashing out the details, and the kids get involved, and what about this animal, and what about that animal, and we each kind of just go off, and I start playing with yarn and colors and swatching and ideas for patterns, and then Eric does the same thing. He'll go off and do a storyboard of the book itself, like an illustrated kind of a comic, like where the story is broken down into pieces. And then we just both kind of do our thing for a while, but we touch back with each other. And I don't know how I would do it without him, because we just encourage each other and help each other. So it's pretty neat, but it usually does come as a whole idea. And I don't know how that happens, but I usually have we start talking and just,
everything goes, falls into
thing is there. So that's my favorite part.
That's really cool. You guys are a great duo. You're lucky to be able to have that kind of connection and creatively be able to work together. And obviously your kids give you a lot of inspiration. If you have 3 little rugrats running around, then that helps.
People are like, do you ever run out of ideas? I'm like, no, we have so many ideas. So yeah.
That's really neat. So on top of just putting these books together, and you write the story, you write the patterns, you kind of piece everything together, your husband does the illustrations, you guys self-publish everything, right? Because you are Slate Falls Press. Yeah,
we do. So that's nothing we never thought.
How did you fall into that? Yeah.
You know, we sent a Phoebe Sweater, our first book, we sent out a draft. So not the finished book as you see it, but like I was talking about, the very clear vision of the story and the colors and like it was a very clear vision for what we ended up creating. And so we submitted sort of a proposal to a knitting book publisher and to a children's book publisher, and it was rejected by both houses. And at the time I was like, oh, this is such a neat idea, like I want this book, and maybe someone else might want it, you know. And I didn't know where to go. We didn't know what to do, because we were facing like, oh, do we send out queries? Do we get an agent? Do we just go and send out 20 and 30 and 40? And Eric was really like, I think the time for this is now. He felt like it's now. This is, we're ready for this now, because we had talked about it for 5 years. We had Phoebe Sweater, I think, for 4 years before we sent it out. So it wasn't like something we threw together over a weekend. Like, we had really talked about it and thought about it for a long time, and we would take it out of the drawer and play with it. I don't know, and then put it back. So, you know, it wasn't like an afterthought. We really thought about this for a long time. So, we started thinking about self-publishing, and we just didn't really know exactly what that would look like. And one night, I'll never forget, we sat up all night talking about, can we do this, and what would it be like, and, you know, what yarn company would we want to work with, and, you know. And the next day, my Yarn Market News magazine came in the mail, and there was a whole article about self-publishing and Kat Bordy and some of the really talented writers who've really done well with it. And it was like, we felt like,
this is it. Yeah, it was a sign.
Like shining out of this page, like, we should look into this. So what we basically did is we just started knocking on doors. Can we get yarn? Can we get this? Can we find a printer? And where we live here in Colorado, in Loveland, which is about an hour north of Denver, and it's an arts community. We have a lot of artists here where we live, and we have a friend who illustrated a few children's books, and one is written by a fellow in Fort Collins who self-publishes also. And so I have that book. We read it with the kids, and I just looked into, well, this guy did this. What printer did he use? So
right, exactly.
I contacted a printer, and then I contacted like a dozen more printers, and I came back, like always, I came back to the one that our friend used. Our printer is fabulous. So we just kept knocking on doors. Okay, we need yarn, you know, we need a printer, we need a photographer, you know, we need all of these puzzle pieces. And every time we knocked on a door, it just swung open for us. And I kept waiting. Okay, something's going to go. By the way, you have to do this impossible thing, you know, and that just never happened.